Hi there, and welcome to the Lotus Simulations L-39 Albatros for Microsoft Flight Simulator X. My name is Mike Johnson. I'm better known here on YouTube, though, as Lotus or Ramus Cernan, if you've seen some of my other funny little flight sim videos in the past. This is my aircraft, 15 months in the making, and this is the first in a series of tutorial videos that's really meant as an addendum to the manual for the aircraft, but may also be of interest to those who haven't got it yet and just want to see what the plane can do. This video is going to cover cockpit orientation. I'll just go through what each of the instruments and systems do and how they work a little bit, and then hopefully a startup and probably a takeoff if there's time. So, starting with cockpit orientation. It's a two-place aircraft, obviously. The L-39 was meant for training, for getting military pilots from very basic propeller-driven aircraft all the way up to the MiG-29 and Su-27. It sort of fills that gap. And I'm going to cover the front cockpit first, and then do a quick run through the rear cockpit, which is mostly similar but has a few unique controls. So, we'll start with the left console and sort of work our way around here. On the left console, you have your control at the back here for your oxygen supply, and your fuel shutoff control, pitot heat, your throttle, obviously. And on the front is mostly engine controls and some cockpit lights. Just go through these. The black button here with the white circle, that is the Saphir starting button. The Saphir is a APU, strictly speaking, but it does not provide electricity. It only provides compressed air to start the engine. Next to that is called the turbo stop button, and this switch here will actually shut off the Saphir starter if you don't want it on. Start mode here isn't covered, but start mode is for maintenance personnel to control how fuel is distributed to the engine. It really has no application. FSX. Next to that we have the flaps buttons, so control your flap position, up, middle, and down. Upper row left here, we've got the engine stop switch, which will cut ignition to the engine, your emergency electric fuel pump. This switch here is a 3-position switch. It controls your instrument lights. So if it's forward, that's red, low intensity instrument lights, and aft is the brighter white lights. Under this covered button here is the fire extinguisher. Just in front of this is your cockpit floodlight knob. This button up on the left, the EGT regulator, this is the exhaust gas temperature limiter system. If this switch is forward, it is disabled. If it's aft, it is on and active. And that will protect your engine if you enter an overtemp situation. It'll actually shut it down in flight to keep it from blowing up. Just next to that, this button here is engine vibration test. The blue button with the white circle, that is your actual engine start button. And this red knob here is your emergency brake. Aft is on and forward is off. This dial right here, this gauge, indicates your available oxygen pressure in the tank and only shows a reading when the oxygen valve is on. Okay, continuing the orientation, we'll go to the front console of the aircraft, and as you can notice, the control stick kind of blocks it a little bit. That's the way the real aircraft is. So if you click on the base of the stick on the leather boot here, you can actually turn it off and on just by clicking with that. So I'll turn it off for now to make things a bit easier. Let's go through the instruments very quickly. This is a totally metric aircraft with the exception of the altimeter right here, which is in feet. Everything else is metric. Speeds in kilometers per hour, distance in kilometers, and temperatures in degrees Celsius. So at the top left here we have our accelerometer, G meter, and there's a reset switch forward right there. Below this we have our clock, and we also have a stopwatch function on the clock here. This left button turns on the stopwatch. It's a very small needle, a little bit hard to see, but there you go. And this button here stops it and resets it. Airspeed indicator here is in kilometers per hour. And there's a Mach needle under there. It's a little bit hard to see right now, but you have a Mach meter as well. The artificial horizon is a Russian unit. Works a little differently than a Western one. Your bank is depicted by a banking bar right here, and the pitch wheel is separate. So it actually displays your roll and pitch separately. It's a little weird to get used to, but it is actually, I think, a superior way to depict your attitude, especially for aerobatics and especially aerobatics on instruments. On the right, you have the vertical speed indicator here. And this looks like a turn coordinator, but it's actually a backup bank angle indicator in case your primary gyro fails. This is a secondary one, and of course a slip ball. Engine RPM right here. You have 2 stages, N1 and N2. Most speeds in the aircraft are in reference to the N1 needle. On the right, we have the exhaust gas temperature gauge. The yellow to blue band right here between these two markings is your normal operating range. Red is obviously the red line. If you get above this red line, the EGT limiter will engage, and you will have an engine shutdown in flight. If you have the EGT limiter disabled, you'll blow it up in pretty spectacular fashion. The altimeter, pretty standard, in feet, nothing special, and you have your pressure alteration right here. The horizontal situation indicator looks a little weird, but it's actually very similar to Western one. This one here controls your OBS selection. So much like it does on a Garmin over here, where it rotates your OBS selection on the outside face, and here it actually rotates this needle, this obelisk-shaped needle. And the bigger end is whatever angle you're pointing at, whatever heading for the OBS. The ILS and VOR, very similar to Western in the middle there. And this horizontal needle here is your ADF bearing. You have two from flags that also appear here as well. The Garmin head, pretty self-explanatory if you've flown any other aircraft. This is called the triple engine indicator here. The top gauge depicts your fuel pressure and will actually read 0 when the engine is idle. It's based on throttle position and works in stages, so you won't get any reading at idle, but it will come alive as throttle increases. On the left here is your oil pressure, and we'll be looking for that to rise, of course, during the engine start. And on the right is oil temperature. On the far right here, this gauge is actually your fuel gauge, and it measures in kilograms times 100. And the fuel is actually measured in kilograms here because energy is actually correctly derived from its mass, not from its volume, since mass is pretty stable, consistent, and volume changes quite a bit with temperature and pressure. It's kind of an ingenious feature of the real airplane. This fuel gauge only shows you the amount in the center tank of the aircraft. It does not display what is in the wingtip tanks. And so its operation is a little bit strange. I'll cover that a little bit later in this video or in the next when we're in flight. On the bottom row, we have the radio altimeter, and you have your decision height control bug right here. Whenever your radio altimeter needle is below this height, you're going to get a dangerous altitude warning light illuminated. This bottom instrument here is non-functional. It's actually for a Russian altimeter to help calibrate its pressure, but it really has no function. It's been replaced by the one built into the Western altimeter here. This little one next to it is your DME1, but in kilometers. So that'll show your distance measuring equipment to your first nav radio. This instrument here is a dual indication of pressure. So it shows the actual pressure inside the cabin right now, which is the same as outside pressure, and the bottom needle shows the pressurization differential between the canopy and the outside air, which should always be positive. If it goes negative, obviously you've got a bit of a problem. On the right is the engine vibration meter. So this will peak out probably around 10-12 millimeters in flight. And on the far right, we have our volt and amp meters. So moving along to the right console, we have all of our electrical bus switches right here, and this blue knob here controls the pressurization of the cockpit. GPS, obviously, and after that we have the external light controls, nav lights, strobes, beacon, and we also have the anti-ice switch right here for automatic mode, for windshield and engine de-icing, and all the way forward for full-on. After that we have the radio stack, which I'll be turning on in a minute. And all the way aft here, we have the gear flaps and emergency generator and hydraulic interconnect. Most of these controls here are to connect the emergency backup system of the aircraft and hydraulics to the main primary system. And the emergency generator will deploy the ram air turbine and flaps and gear for emergency deployment if you have hydraulic problems.